No, it's. I like to keep. I keep doing things that are a little different. I adjust my style depending on who I'm working for. I may become very impressionistic with someone and very classical with somebody else. My signature is still always on my work because of the color I use, the way I draw, and etc.
Now you've done portraits of animals, correct? You have, talk a bit about the variety of things you've done.
Well, like I said before, anything for a buck, you know. I've done animals, I've done thoroughbreds, which are very challenging because there's a tradition of how they like to see a thoroughbred. And this is something you have to know. If you don't do it properly, then they're not going to buy it.
Sure.
The head's a little smaller in a thoroughbred. I've done some standard breds too. Arabians, you know, tiny feet, the hoofs, the long necks, smaller head. I don't exaggerate too much because I like to retain the realism.
And what about dogs? And
yeah, dogs. People love their pets. It's just they're just as important sometimes and sometimes more important than the rest of the family.
Now,
of course, they don't last as long. A dog is deceased quicker.
So you've done portraits of governors. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, this was kind of rewarding too. I did Governor Mickelson, who was the governor of South Dakota, and they put out a kind of they wanted to see some portrait artists. They wanted to use a state artist, and they did try to, but it was unsuccessful. So then they came back to me, and he was deceased, died in a plane crash with his staff, and this was a very rewarding portrait because when we did the final sitting at his house in Sioux Falls, his family was all there, and of course, you know, do a little bit, you know, the eye isn't quite right color, or this, and we did that, and it's like showtime. The painting was up on the mantle in their living room, and the family was there, and then he brought in the grandmother, who they told me not to take her too seriously because she could be tough and very caustic. And so I was ready for her. And she came in, they brought her in a wheelchair, and she sat there and looked at the painting for long seconds, and then the tears came down her face, and all she said was, that's George. And it was very heartwarming. I did, as a matter of fact, this pin here was Governor Mickelson's state seal, and his widow gave it to me to include in the painting that hangs in the State House. And when I delivered the painting, I gave her back this pin, and she said she wanted me to keep it as a remembrance of George. And I've been wearing it ever since. So it does get kind of, I don't know, a little schmaltzy maybe.
So there was another governor's portrait you did also?
Governor Miller and Governor Patterson.
Now those are governors of which state?
Governor Patterson was the governor of Alabama. I did him later in his life. He was the youngest governor that was ever in Alabama, and he was on the Court of Appeals there, State Court of Appeals. And this is when I did him. So it was after. It wasn't a state portrait. It was it was for the actually it was for the State House, but he was in his judge's robes. And Governor Miller, no relation by the way, he was a great guy. He followed George Mickelson in South Dakota, and had one of the finest meals I've ever had at the mansion there when we did this sitting for him. It's nice to do these kind of people. They treat you very well. Sure.
You've done a couple of professional athletes.
I've done a lot of golfers. God, you know, I've done so many that I kind of, it's hard for me to remember them all. I've done golfers for the Golf Hall of Fame, and athletes, not too many other athletes. Mostly golfers. I'm expecting to do the next inductee at Augusta in their Hall of Fame. I don't know who that will be, and the final word, of course, goes to the sponsor. Who does it is the call of the sponsor, the guy who's going to, the people who are going to pay for it.
When do they make that decision?
They do about one a year. About one a year. And,
so that would be coming up at the end of the golf season?
I don't know. I've got to get back to them now. They're about to do another one. I don't know who it will be. They just finished Arnold Palmer before I got involved. So it's hard to say. But no, I find my career very exciting. I love what I do.
Do you get to meet other portrait artists?
Oh, sure. There's a couple of societies. The
Oh,
American
really?
Society of Portrait Artists, the Portrait Society of America, then there's the National Sculpture Society. I'm a member of all these things.
I see.
And I do try to get to them to meet some of my peers whenever I can. It's not always possible, but I missed this year because they're usually quite a ways away.
Sure.
They've had them in Washington, they've had them in Philadelphia, they've had them down south in Alabama.
And I understand you do have a website, and it's a very wonderful website.
Thank you.
And how does that help you at all to reach out to a broader audience?
Yes, it's basically our primary marketing tool. I have a couple of agents, but that is primarily where we get business. And we've been getting we've gotten several monumental bronze sculptures to do through the website. And we also market antiques and military and things like that. It's just a fun site.
And the website, which we will be putting on the air too, if you could give it to us now.
It's richardmiller.com, www.richardmiller.com, no caps, no spaces. And that'll get you there.
Very easy to remember.
Yeah, well, I've had it for quite a while, so.
A very extensive website, which includes not only portrait work that you've done, but also the sculpture work, which you've been doing more recently.
Landscapes, Civil War paintings. I've done quite a few of those, and I go through phases. I've done a lot of watercolor, pure watercolor, that I found quite challenging, and I've used Conti, which is kind of the medium of the masters. It's a Conti crayon, and I've done a few like that. It's a kind of a sepia-colored crayon, an oil-based crayon. And I grind it up and dissolve it and paint with it. So I do it a little differently on gessoed masonite, and therefore I can varnish it, and I don't have to glass it.
Now, does your work take you at all out of the United States?
No, usually people who want from other countries. My work is all over the world. I have portraits in England, several, and in a couple in Israel. I did the trade minister, Canadian trade minister for the university at Tel Aviv, and I've done a couple of the speakers of the House in Canada. Of course, I've done a lot of work in Canada coming from there.
Sure.
And as a matter of fact, we're talking now about a monument of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, which we are going to make a presentation for.
That's
so
great.
it is exciting. It is very exciting. And it does allow me to meet some exciting people.
Sure. Yeah. Now, we're going to be showing in a minute or so some footage from the video.
Okay.
And if you could explain a bit of what the video was about, and then we'll go right into it and show a clip from it.
Well, it was basically an instructional video, but I think it was well done. We spent a lot of money on the post-production for this video. And it was this is why I made this this painting here. This is a duplicate, not exactly, but the same as the painting that's installed at Tuskegee. And because it's complex, because the subjects are posthumous, I thought it would make a good video as an instructional piece. And so that's why we made it. And it's an hour and 35 minutes long, and I think quite entertaining.
And we're going to be seeing the summary of it.
Yes.
And we're going to do that now, and we'll come back and talk a few more minutes after that.
Thank you.
For the portrait artist, painting the posthumous portrait can be much more rewarding, much more personally satisfying than even the fee can be. We have described the moment in history and the personal relationship between two industrial icons, and it is chronicled for posterity. In this case, I was extremely fortunate to find a photograph of our two principals engaged in friendly conversation, giving us basic composition and the simplicity of their profiles. It was necessary to simplify and redesign the environment with a careful drawing on a toned linen canvas. At this time, a photograph of the drawing was sent to the client for approval. Approximate values and colors were loosely washed in to establish a primary correlation and also to get a first look at the composition. I then proceeded to work out the painting from distant sky to immediate foreground, adjusting and revising to my concept of the best possible result. The heads were of primary concern. Dr. Carver, as a black man, had to be enhanced from an area of light, whereas Henry Ford, as a white man, needed to emerge from darkness. Of course, a good likeness was also required. Features had to be precisely defined from reference photography that was flat and indefinite. With the posthumous portrait, the perception and imagination of the artist is challenged. The portrait must be more than the sum of its reference. The artist has to fill the gaps, find the missing detail, see color where there is no color, and draw heavily from individual experience. An area that many portrait painters tend to avoid because of the complexity are the hands. Study them, because they can be even more important than facial expression. The shape, the attitude, the gesture, all contribute much to describing personality. Never underestimate the body language of your subject. When your work is complete and the surface is dry, a coat of retouch varnish should be applied to restore the depth of color. I should emphasize retouch varnish only, nothing else. It takes a minimum of 4 to 6 months for the paint to be dry enough for a final varnish application. And finally, with the addition of a suitable frame, the finished portrait is ready to be presented to the client for final approval. Before we close, there is one more thing I'd like to say to you. I honestly believe, as portrait artists, we are among the most fortunate people in the world. A good portrait can contribute profoundly to human existence, elevating our subjects and giving them some measure of immortality. A good posthumous portrait can document history like nothing else. It can also give something back to family and loved ones, something tangible and extremely important. But most of all, to be able to do what you love to do for the rest of your life, and to feel that your work is important enough to add something positive to this world is a great gift. And I, for one, am very grateful. So, break a brush, good luck, and goodbye.
Well, we've just seen a great summary of the work you've done with the George Washington Carver and Henry Ford, the first portrait. And it really bespeaks of the incredible professionalism and artistry and knowledge you have, all these years of specializing in this, and now of course you're on your way in doing the other things too. And I want to thank you, Richard Miller, for being with us. And would you give us your website again?
Yes, it's www.richardmiller.com. And I want to thank you for having me.
And I hope to join us again, and we'll talk about your
certainly
sculpting
appreciate
the next
that.
time.
Yes, anytime.
I'm Mary Ann Verdi-Huss, and I hope you join us again to Metro Art and Book Talk.